If you're dealing with a narcissist, the first thing you need to understand is that they're not engaging with you in the same way you're engaging with them. You're operating under the assumption that relationships are built on mutual respect, reciprocity, and shared understanding. That's the framework you bring to the table because it's the framework that allows for meaningful human connection. But the narcissist doesn't see it that way. Their game is entirely different. They are not interested in mutuality, they are interested in power. A narcissist's primary goal in any interaction is to secure control, attention, and validation on their terms. If that means distorting reality, then so be it. If it means gaslighting you into questioning your own perceptions, they'll do it without hesitation. If it means undermining your confidence so that you become more pliable, more easily manipulated, then that's exactly what they'll pursue, and they won't feel guilty about it. That's what makes them dangerous. Now, some people make the mistake of thinking that if they just show enough kindness, if they're patient enough, if they explain things clearly enough, the narcissist will eventually come around, but that's an illusion. A narcissist does not learn through reasoned discussion or moral appeals. They learn through consequences. And if you refuse to recognize this fundamental truth, you are setting yourself up for endless frustration, self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion. So, what does recognizing their tactics actually look like in practice? First, it means paying attention to patterns rather than words. Narcissists are experts at saying exactly what you want to hear. They'll promise change, they'll feign remorse, they'll even play the victim to keep you entangled in their web. But the real question is, what do their actions consistently demonstrate? If there is a pattern of deception, manipulation, or disrespect, then that is the truth of the situation, regardless of what they say. Second, you must understand that narcissists deploy specific psychological tactics to maintain their dominance. One of the most insidious is gaslighting, making you doubt your own reality. They'll deny things they've said even when you have evidence. They'll rewrite history, subtly shifting the narrative until you find yourself apologizing for something you didn't even do. The more you engage in these arguments, the more control they gain, because the very act of defending yourself places you in a subordinate position. You are reacting to them, which means they are dictating the terms of the conversation. Another common tactic is intermittent reinforcement, alternating between affection and cruelty in unpredictable cycles. This is powerful because it mirrors the psychological mechanism behind addiction. If someone is consistently cruel, you will eventually detach, but if they occasionally throw in moments of kindness, your mind starts chasing the reward, hoping that if you just do the right thing, you'll get more of the good and less of the bad. This creates a toxic dependency where you stay in the relationship not because it's fulfilling, but because you're trying to get back to those fleeting moments of warmth that were, in reality, just another tool of manipulation. And then there's projection. The narcissist will accuse you of the very things they are guilty of. If they're dishonest, they'll call you a liar. If they're emotionally unstable, they'll claim you're the one being irrational. This serves two purposes. First, it deflects attention away from their own behavior. And second, it keeps you so busy defending yourself that you don't have time to recognize what's really happening. Recognizing these tactics is not about becoming cynical or paranoid. It's about clarity. It's about stripping away the illusions and seeing things for what they are. Because once you see the game, you stop playing it. And when you stop playing, the narcissist loses their power over you. So if you want to stop being controlled, stop being manipulated, stop being drained, step one is simple. See the narcissist for who they truly are, not who you wish they were. Because reality, as brutal as it sometimes is, will always serve you better than a comforting lie. One of the most self-destructive traps you can fall into when dealing with a narcissist is seeking their approval. And I don't just mean overtly trying to impress them. I mean the subtle, almost unconscious ways in which you modify your behavior to avoid their criticism, to gain a shred of their acknowledgement, or to finally, just once, be treated with the respect you deserve. It's an easy trap to fall into because, as human beings, we're wired for social reciprocity. When we invest in a relationship, whether it's personal, professional, or familial, we expect at some fundamental level that our efforts will be recognized, that if we just explain ourselves properly, if we just demonstrate our loyalty, our good intentions, our patience, then surely at some point the narcissist will acknowledge it and change accordingly. But that moment never comes. That's because narcissists don't operate within the framework of reciprocity. They see your efforts not as a reason to respect you, but as confirmation that they control you. Every time you contort yourself to avoid their disapproval, you reinforce their dominance. Every time you wait for their validation, you grant them power over your self-worth. And if you think that there's some magic combination of words or actions that will finally make them see you for who you really are, you are wasting your time. Because for them, the goalposts are always moving. The moment you think you've done enough, they'll find a new standard to hold you to, one they never intend for you to meet. It's not about you. That's the core realization. Their inability to respect you is not a reflection of your worth, but a consequence of their pathology. The narcissist's sense of self is fragile, built on an illusion of superiority that must be constantly upheld. They cannot allow themselves to be wrong, because to do so would shatter that illusion. They cannot allow others to be truly seen or appreciated, because that would mean relinquishing control. And so they move through life extracting, manipulating, diminishing, because it's the only way they know how to maintain their inflated self-image. Once you understand this, the correct response becomes clear. You must detach, emotionally, psychologically, and where possible, physically. And that begins with one critical step. You must stop looking to them for approval in any form. That doesn't mean being rude. It doesn't mean retaliating with cruelty. It simply means removing yourself from the psychological game they are trying to trap you in. So how does this actually play out in the real world? It means no longer justifying yourself to them. A narcissist thrives on argument because argument implies that their opinion matters. The moment you start defending yourself, you've already lost, because now the conversation is being framed around their perception of you rather than your own intrinsic reality. Stop explaining yourself to someone who is only looking for ammunition. If they distort your words, let them. If they misrepresent your intentions, so be it. Their perception of you is not your responsibility to fix. It also means letting go of the need for closure. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn. We all want resolution. We all want that final moment where the narcissist acknowledges their wrongdoing, where they apologize, where they finally give us that sense of justice we've been waiting for. But that moment isn't coming, and the more you chase it, the longer you remain ensnared in their web. The only closure you will ever get is the one you give yourself. The decision to walk away, to stop engaging, to accept that their recognition is not required for your self-worth to remain intact. And perhaps most importantly, it means redefining your own source of validation. If you've spent years, maybe decades, adjusting your self-permission to fit the expectations of someone who is never capable of valuing you in the first place, then it's time to take that power back. Your worth is not something that exists at the mercy of another person's recognition. It is something you must claim for yourself. And the moment you do, the narcissist loses the very thing that made them powerful over you in the first place. Because in the end, the most radical act of defiance against a narcissist is simple. Stop needing them to see you. See yourself instead. One of the most dangerous mistakes you can make when dealing with a narcissist is assuming that playing by the rules will protect you. That if you're fair, if you're reasonable, if you keep giving them the benefit of the doubt, they'll eventually reciprocate. But this assumption rests on a flawed premise, that the narcissist values fairness, that they respond to reason, that they are even playing the same game you are. They're not. A narcissist operates within a completely different psychological framework. You see, most people, when they enter into a conflict, whether it's a disagreement with a friend, a tense conversation with a partner, or even a workplace dispute, are operating under the assumption that there's some shared objective reality, that if both people lay out their perspectives honestly, the truth will eventually emerge and some form of resolution can be reached. But a narcissist has no interest in resolution. Their interest is in dominance. And that's where you have to stop making the mistake of believing that being the bigger person, being endlessly patient, endlessly understanding, will lead to a breakthrough. It won't. Because to a narcissist, your willingness to engage, your willingness to keep explaining, to keep justifying yourself, to keep hoping for a rational response is not seen as strength. It's seen as weakness. It's an opportunity. It tells them that they still have control over your mind, your emotions, your actions. It tells them that you are still playing their game, even if you don't realize it. So What do? Instead? You stop reacting the way they want you to. You stop giving them the emotional fuel they thrive on. Because here's something important to understand. Narcissists are not self-sustaining. They don't generate their own sense of stability, their own sense of identity, their own sense of worth. They extract it from others. That's why they provoke, why they manipulate, why they create conflict where none should exist. It's all an attempt to keep you engaged, because engagement equals power. If you want to disarm a narcissist, you must remove that power. And that begins with mastering something that is both incredibly simple and incredibly difficult: emotional detachment. Now, I don't mean suppressing your emotions entirely. That's not healthy and it's not sustainable. What I mean is developing the ability to remain unaffected by their provocations, to recognize that their attempts to guilt you, to bait you, to drag you into another cycle of argument and justification are nothing more than a strategy to keep you under their influence. This is where the concept of gray rocking comes in. It's a psychological technique that involves making yourself as uninteresting, as unemotional, and as disengaged as possible when dealing with a narcissist. They thrive on reactions, whether it's anger, frustration, sadness, or even affection, because reactions mean they're still in control. But if you refuse to engage, if you stop giving them the dramatic emotional response they crave, they lose their leverage. They get bored, they move on. But let's be clear, this isn't easy. It's not easy to sit in the presence of someone who is deliberately trying to provoke you and refuse to take the bait. It's not easy to hear outrageous accusations and choose not to defend yourself. It's not easy to watch them rewrite history and smear your name and simply say, believe what you want. But it is necessary, because every time you engage, every time you fight back, every time you try to prove yourself to someone who has no interest in truth, you are feeding the very dynamic that is draining you. This is a form of psychological self-discipline. It's the ability to say, I do not need this person's validation. I do not need to correct their false narrative. I do not need to win their approval or prove my worth in their eyes. And when you reach that level of detachment, you become untouchable. Because a narcissist cannot control what they cannot provoke. In the end, the most powerful response to a narcissist is not anger. It's not even confrontation. It's indifference. When they realize they no longer have the ability to pull you into their chaos, they lose interest. And that is when you finally regain your freedom. One of the greatest traps you can fall into when dealing with a narcissist is engaging in the endless cycle of conflict they create. You might think that if you can just make them understand your perspective, if you can finally prove your point, if you can get them to acknowledge their behavior, then everything will change. But that's an illusion. A narcissist doesn't argue to resolve anything, they argue to dominate. Their goal is not to find the truth, not to come to a mutual understanding, not even to prove they're right in any coherent way. Their goal is to keep you entangled, to keep you emotionally invested, to keep you reacting, because as long as you're reacting, you're still in the game, and as long as you're in the game, they still have power over you. Think about how this plays out. You bring up an issue, something they did that was disrespectful, dishonest, or hurtful. A normal person, even if they don't agree, would at least attempt to understand your perspective. They'd engage in good faith. But what does the narcissist do? They deflect. They shift the blame. They bring up something completely unrelated that you did 6 months ago. They twist your words. They accuse you of being the problem. And before you know it, you're no longer discussing the issue at hand. You're defending yourself. And that's where they win. Because the moment you start defending yourself, the conversation is no longer about their behavior. It's about proving your innocence. They've successfully turned the tables. Now you're on trial. Now you're expending all of your mental and emotional energy justifying yourself while they sit back and watch you exhaust yourself in a battle that was never meant to be fair in the first place. So how do you stop this? How do you remove yourself from this psychological warfare? You learn to disengage. You stop justifying yourself. You stop explaining. You stop trying to win a debate that was never designed to be winnable. Now, that doesn't mean you let them walk all over you. It doesn't mean you tolerate abuse or stay silent in the face of injustice. It means you refuse to participate in a rigged game. It means you set boundaries that are not up for negotiation. A narcissist thrives on emotional chaos, and they will do everything in their power to keep you off balance. If you say, I won't tolerate being spoken to that way, they'll push harder to see if you really mean it. If you say, I won't engage in this kind of argument, they'll try to provoke you until you break your own rule. Because if they can get you to react, they win. They've proven that your boundaries are just words. So your job is to make sure they aren't. Your job is to follow through. If you say you're leaving the conversation, leave. If you say you won't tolerate disrespect, don't. If you say you won't explain yourself, stop explaining. Because the moment a narcissist realizes that their usual tactics no longer work on you, they start to lose interest. You are no longer the easy target they once thought you were. But here's the hard part. Standing firm in your boundaries means tolerating discomfort. It means resisting the urge to correct them when they lie about you. It means resisting the urge to defend yourself when they twist the narrative. It means accepting that they will never see the truth because they don't want to. And that's okay. Your peace, your dignity, your self-respect, these things do not depend on their recognition. They depend on your ability to walk away from pointless battles, to refuse to be baited, to prioritize your own well-being over the illusion of winning an argument, because in the end, the real victory isn't proving a narcissist wrong. It's proving to yourself that you no longer need their validation at all. There's a hard truth you have to come to terms with when dealing with a narcissist. They will never respect your boundaries unless you enforce them. And enforcement doesn't mean explaining your boundaries over and over, hoping they'll finally understand. It doesn't mean making threats you don't follow through on. It doesn't mean hoping they'll suddenly develop self-awareness and start treating you with the respect you deserve. It means action. It means consequences. You see, a narcissist doesn't recognize boundaries in the way a healthy person does. A healthy person, when told this behavior is unacceptable and I won't tolerate it, will at least pause and reflect. They may not always agree, but they'll respect that you have a right to draw the line somewhere. A narcissist, on the other hand, sees your boundaries as a challenge, an obstacle to overcome, a test of how much they can get away with. And they will keep pushing until they find the breaking point. This is why half measures don't work. If you set a boundary but don't enforce it, all you've really done is teach the narcissist that your words mean nothing. That if they push hard enough, if they apply enough pressure, if they create enough guilt, you'll cave. And once they know that, once they see that your limits are negotiable, they'll exploit that knowledge relentlessly. So what does real enforcement look like? It means being willing to walk away from conversations that cross the line. It means removing yourself from toxic situations, even if it causes temporary discomfort. It means understanding that you don't have to argue, negotiate, or explain yourself endlessly. You simply have to act. And here's where people struggle. Because action is difficult. It's uncomfortable. There's a cost to it. Setting and enforcing boundaries means accepting that the narcissist will react badly, and they will. They will accuse you of being selfish, of being cruel, of being unreasonable. They will play the victim. They will lash out because they have no interest in respecting your boundaries. Their only interest is in making sure you feel guilty enough to drop them. And this is where you have to be strong enough to tolerate the discomfort of doing what's necessary. You have to accept that when you start enforcing boundaries, the narcissist will escalate. If they used to manipulate you subtly, they might start attacking you outright. If they used to guilt trip you, they might start playing the victim more dramatically. If they used to rely on charm, they might switch to outright hostility. This is called an extinction burst, a last-ditch effort to regain control when they realize their usual tactics aren't working. And this is the moment where most people fail, because it's in this moment that the pressure feels unbearable. The accusations, the guilt, the manipulation, it all intensifies. And if you're not prepared for it, you'll give in. Think, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should just explain myself one more time. And the moment you do, the narcissist knows they still have control over you. They'll pull back, act as if everything's fine for a little while, and then slowly but surely start pushing again. The only way to break this cycle is to stop giving them a reason to believe they can change your mind, to make it clear, through action, not words, that your boundaries are real, that they are not up for negotiation, and that violating them has consequences. That might mean cutting contact. It might mean disengaging emotionally. It might mean refusing to respond to provocations. Whatever the situation calls for, the key is consistency. Because in the end, boundaries are not about controlling the narcissist's behavior. You will never control them. They will always do what serves their ego, their control, their power. Boundaries are about controlling your own behavior, about deciding what you will and will not tolerate, about choosing to remove yourself from situations that drain you, about prioritizing your own well-being over the illusion that you can change them. And when you finally do that, when you finally enforce boundaries with unwavering resolve, something remarkable happens. The narcissist loses their grip on you. Their power fades. You begin to reclaim something they were never meant to have in the first place: your autonomy, your dignity, your peace. And that is a battle worth winning. One of the most difficult realizations you'll have when dealing with a narcissist is understanding that they will never give you closure. That apology you're waiting for, that moment where they finally acknowledge the pain they caused you, it's not coming. And the longer you wait for it, the longer you stay trapped in their psychological web. Because here's the thing, narcissists don't reflect on their actions the way healthy people do. They don't lie awake at night wrestling with guilt, wondering how they can make things right. They don't replay the past and think, maybe I went too far. That's not how their mind works. Their concern is not the truth. Their concern is maintaining control. And if that means rewriting history, if that means making you the villain, if that means distorting reality so thoroughly that even you begin to doubt yourself, then that is exactly what they will do. And if you're not careful, you will spend years, maybe even decades, trying to extract something from them that they are fundamentally incapable of giving. You will hold out hope that if you just say the right thing, if you just prove your point convincingly enough, they'll finally see. They won't, not because the truth isn't clear, but because admitting it would mean relinquishing the power they have over you. So you have a choice. You can keep chasing an apology that will never come. You can keep replaying conversations in your head, imagining different outcomes, trying to make sense of something that was never meant to make sense. Why? Or you can decide that your healing is not dependent on them. You can decide that closure is something you give to yourself. And that's not easy, because we are wired to seek resolution. Our minds crave order, narrative coherence. When someone wrongs us, when they betray our trust, when they inflict wounds that linger, we want acknowledgement. We want justice. We want the story to have a clean ending. But life is messy. And when you're dealing with a narcissist, the ending you want, the resolution where they finally take accountability, is an illusion. So what do you do instead? You reclaim your own narrative. You stop waiting for them to set you free, and you set yourself free. That means accepting that some people will never understand what they did to you, and choosing to move forward anyway. That means letting go of the idea that their validation is necessary for your healing. It's not, it never was, and that's where true power lies. Because as long as you're waiting for them to acknowledge the truth, they still have control over you. As long as you're hoping for a moment of clarity from them, they still dictate your emotional state. But the moment you stop seeking their validation, the moment you decide that their opinion, their version of events, their refusal to acknowledge reality is irrelevant, that is the moment you win. That is the moment they lose their hold on you. And here is the paradox. The less you need closure from them, the more power you have over your own life. The moment you stop explaining, stop defending, stop waiting, you become untouchable. Because a narcissist's greatest weapon is their ability to manipulate your need for resolution. Take that away and they have nothing. Healing from a narcissist isn't about getting them to see what they've done. It's about seeing it clearly yourself. It's about recognizing that their lack of accountability is not a reflection of your worth, but of their own brokenness. It's about understanding that closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you finally deciding that you don't need their permission to move on. And when you do that, when you truly let go, something remarkable happens. The weight they placed on you begins to lift. The anger, the confusion, the self-doubt, it starts to fade, not because what they did was okay, but because you've chosen to no longer let it define you. In the end, the greatest revenge against a narcissist isn't proving them wrong. It isn't making them apologize. It isn't even exposing them. It's thriving without them. It's living a life so full, so independent, so unshackled from their influence that they become nothing more than a distant memory. A lesson learned, a chapter closed. And that is real closure.